There's a strange kind of procrastination that feels almost impossible to explain. You care about the thing, you know it matters, you genuinely want to do it, and yet you don't. The document stays blank, the application remains unfinished, the workout gets postponed, the email sits in drafts. The project you've been thinking about for months somehow never becomes real. And the frustrating part is that you're not indifferent. If anything, you care too much. You think about it while eating. You think about it before sleeping. You feel guilty when you're doing something else. You promise yourself that tomorrow will be different. Then tomorrow arrives, and somehow you avoid it again. So eventually you begin asking a painful question. If this really mattered to me, wouldn't I just do it? That question sounds reasonable, but psychologically, it misunderstands what procrastination often is. Because procrastination is not simply a problem of caring too little. Sometimes it happens precisely because you care so much. Imagine two tasks. The first is completely meaningless. You need to organize a folder containing files you barely care about. The second could affect your future. It's the portfolio that might help you change careers, the business you've dreamed about starting, the exam that could determine what happens next. Which task carries more emotional weight? Obviously, the second. And that emotional weight changes the experience of beginning. Now the task isn't just write the first page. It becomes, what if the first page is terrible? What if I discover I'm not actually good enough? What if I try seriously and still fail? What if everyone sees what I'm capable of and it isn't much? Suddenly you're not facing a task. You're facing a threat. This is one of the most important things to understand about procrastination. You often avoid the emotion attached to the task, not the task itself. The spreadsheet may take 20 minutes, but opening it reminds you that you're behind. The email may take 5 minutes, but writing it means having an uncomfortable conversation. The application may take an hour, but submitting it creates the possibility of rejection. The project may be exciting, but starting it forces you to compare the beautiful version in your imagination with the imperfect version you can actually create. So your brain discovers a remarkably effective strategy. Don't start. Not forever. Just not right now. Check your phone first. Make coffee. Clean the desk. Watch one video. Research a little more. Maybe organize your notes. And suddenly, something interesting happens. You feel better. The anxiety decreases. The uncertainty disappears. The uncomfortable task is still there, but for the next few minutes, you don't have to feel what it creates inside you. That relief matters, because your brain learns from relief. Think of the sequence. Task appears. Discomfort rises. You avoid the task. Discomfort falls. Your brain notices. The next time the task appears, avoidance becomes slightly more attractive. Not because you consciously decided procrastination was a good strategy, but because your nervous system learned, when I move away from this, I feel better. That is why procrastination can become self-reinforcing. You're not rewarded with success. You're rewarded with relief. And relief is immediate. The consequences are delayed. This creates an unfair psychological competition. On one side, do the task now. Experience uncertainty, boredom, frustration, fear, or self-doubt immediately. Maybe receive a reward weeks or months later. On the other side, avoid the task now. Receive relief immediately. Pay the price later. Your present brain often chooses the immediate reward. Tomorrow's stress belongs to tomorrow's version of you, so you postpone. And for a moment, it works. But then the deadline gets closer. The unfinished task becomes heavier. Guilt appears. Now you're not only thinking, I need to do this. You're also thinking, why didn't I start earlier? What is wrong with me? I've wasted so much time. This should already be finished. The task now carries its original difficulty, plus shame. And shame rarely makes beginning easier. It often makes avoidance even more tempting. This creates the procrastination loop: discomfort, avoidance, relief, guilt, more discomfort, more avoidance. And eventually, you may start calling the loop your personality. I'm lazy. I have no discipline. I always ruin things. I'm just a procrastinator. But notice what happened. A behavior became an identity. And once procrastination becomes part of your identity, every delayed task starts feeling like evidence. You don't just postpone writing. You prove that you're undisciplined. You don't just skip one workout. You prove that you never follow through. You don't just avoid one difficult conversation. You prove that you're incapable of handling uncomfortable things. The emotional stakes become even higher, which makes avoidance even easier. But there is another layer. Sometimes procrastination protects something surprisingly valuable, your potential. As long as you haven't fully tried, you can still imagine what might have happened if you had. The unfinished novel can still be brilliant. The business idea can still become successful. The exam could have gone differently if you had studied properly. The project could have been amazing if you'd had more time. Not trying completely preserves an escape route. If I failed, it wasn't because I wasn't capable. I just didn't really try. That explanation can protect your self-image. Because trying seriously creates a terrifying possibility. You might discover your current limits. And sometimes the fantasy of potential feels safer than evidence from reality. So procrastination can become a strange form of self-protection. It protects you from finding out, but it also prevents you from growing. And this is where procrastination becomes paradoxical. You avoid the task because it matters. Then your avoidance threatens the very thing you care about, which creates more anxiety, which makes you want to avoid it again. The problem was never simply, how do I force myself to work? A better question is, what feeling am I trying not to experience when I avoid this? Because once you ask that question, procrastination starts looking very different. And one of the strongest emotions hiding underneath it is something almost everyone recognizes: the fear that what you produce will not be good enough. Perfectionism is often mistaken for having high standards. But perfectionism and high standards are not the same thing. High standards can make you work harder. Perfectionism can make you afraid to begin. Because when perfectionism takes control, the goal quietly changes. You're no longer trying to create something good. You're trying to avoid creating something bad. And those are psychologically very different goals. Imagine you want to write something important. Before you've written a single sentence, your mind can already see the finished version. It's intelligent, clear, original, impressive. Then you open the blank document, and the first sentence you type is ordinary. Immediately, reality collides with imagination. The version in your head was effortless. The real version is awkward. So you delete the sentence. Try another. Delete that too. 20 minutes later, the page is still blank. And strangely, the blank page can feel safer. Because a blank page cannot disappoint you. It still contains every possibility. The moment you create something real, possibilities collapse into one imperfect result. This is why beginning can feel like losing something. Before you start, the project could be extraordinary. After you start, you have to confront what you can actually produce today. And if your identity is connected to being intelligent, talented, creative, successful, or capable, that confrontation can feel threatening. Suppose you believe, I'm supposed to be good at this. Now struggling becomes dangerous. Because struggle seems to say something about you. You don't interpret difficulty as, this is difficult. You interpret it as, maybe I'm not as capable as I thought. So procrastination offers protection. As long as you delay, your ability remains untested. And if you eventually rush the task at the last minute and the result is mediocre, you have an explanation ready. I only had one night. Notice how psychologically useful that explanation can be. If you had spent 3 weeks working seriously and still produced something average, your ego might have to confront an uncomfortable question. But if you started at midnight before the deadline, now the result doesn't really count. You had no time. You were exhausted. You weren't at your best. Your potential remains intact. This is called self-handicapping. You create conditions that make failure easier to explain. Of course, consciously, you may hate doing this. You may genuinely wish you had started earlier. But another part of you may prefer an excuse to an honest test of your ability. And perfectionism isn't the only thing making important tasks heavy. There's also ambiguity. Your brain likes clear finish lines. Wash the dishes. Send the invoice. Buy groceries. These tasks have obvious next actions. But consider, build my career, get healthier, start a business, write a book, fix my life. Where do you begin? The task is enormous. There are hundreds of possible actions. No obvious starting point. No guaranteed path. And uncertainty creates friction. So instead of taking action, you begin thinking about action. You research productivity systems. You watch tutorials. You create elaborate plans. You reorganize your workspace. You compare tools. You make another list. Some of this can be useful, but planning has a dangerous feature. It feels productive without requiring the vulnerability of producing anything. You can spend 5 hours researching how to start a business without asking a single customer to pay you. You can watch 20 videos about fitness without exercising. You can design the perfect writing schedule without writing. Preparation becomes a hiding place. And because preparation looks responsible, procrastination becomes harder to recognize. You tell yourself, I'm getting ready. But sometimes you're not preparing to begin. You're preparing instead of beginning. There is another reason we procrastinate on things we care about. The reward is often too far away. Consider learning a language. Today's effort might be frustrating. The meaningful reward may require hundreds of hours. Or building a business. Today you might work for 3 hours and receive nothing. No money, no applause, no certainty that it will work. Your brain compares that distant reward with alternatives available right now. A notification gives stimulation immediately. A video gives entertainment immediately. Food gives pleasure immediately. Scrolling gives novelty immediately. The important project says, work now. Maybe something meaningful happens 6 months from now. Your phone says, feel something interesting in 3 seconds. That is a difficult competition. And when you're tired, stressed, lonely, overwhelmed, or emotionally depleted, immediate rewards become even more attractive. This is why procrastination often gets worse when your overall life becomes harder. You may think you suddenly lost discipline, but sometimes your capacity for tolerating discomfort simply decreased. After a stressful day, asking yourself to begin a cognitively difficult task requires more than time. It requires emotional energy. And when that energy is low, your brain naturally looks for easier regulation. Scrolling, gaming, eating, watching something, cleaning, sleeping. Anything that changes how you feel without demanding much from you. This doesn't mean every act of rest is procrastination. Rest restores you. Avoidance temporarily removes discomfort while leaving the source untouched. The difference often becomes obvious afterward. After real rest, you feel more capable of returning. After avoidance, you often feel heavier. Because the task followed you. You watched the video, but part of your mind remained aware of the unfinished work. You checked social media, but the deadline was still approaching. You cleaned the entire room, but the application remained unopened. So the break never fully becomes a break. It contains guilt. And now another trap appears, waiting to feel ready. You tell yourself, I'll start when I'm motivated, when I can focus properly, when I have a free afternoon, when I'm less stressed, when I know exactly what I'm doing. But readiness is unreliable. Some days motivation arrives. Many days it doesn't. If action depends on feeling ready, your emotions become the gatekeeper of your behavior. And this is especially dangerous because motivation often appears after beginning, not before it. You don't always feel motivated and then act. Sometimes you act, and then motivation catches up. The first 5 minutes feel resistant. Then the task becomes clearer. Progress becomes visible. Uncertainty decreases. Your brain stops imagining the work and starts interacting with reality. Momentum appears. Which means one of procrastination's greatest illusions is this: I need to feel different before I can begin. Often you don't. You need to begin while feeling exactly as you feel now: uncertain, unmotivated, imperfect, maybe even afraid. Because the goal is not to eliminate discomfort before action. It is to become capable of acting while discomfort is present. And that changes the question again. Instead of asking, how do I become motivated enough to do this? Ask, how can I make beginning so small that motivation is no longer required? That is where procrastination begins to lose its power. If procrastination were simply laziness, the solution would be obvious. Try harder. Become more disciplined. Stop making excuses. But if procrastination is often an attempt to regulate discomfort, then the solution has to address something deeper. You have to change your relationship with beginning, because beginning is where most of the emotional friction lives. Think about a task you've been avoiding. Maybe you tell yourself, I need to finish the presentation. That sounds like one task, but your brain hears something much larger. Research everything. Organize the ideas. Write the slides. Make them look good. Check the data. Practice the presentation. Fix the mistakes. Make sure nobody thinks you're incompetent. No wonder you want to escape. So shrink the task. Not finish the presentation, but open the file. Then write 3 ugly bullet points. Not work out for an hour, but put on my shoes. Not write the chapter, but write one bad paragraph. This can feel almost ridiculously small. That is the point. Procrastination thrives when the psychological cost of beginning feels enormous. Your first job is to reduce that cost. And notice the word bad. Write a bad paragraph. Create an ugly first draft. Make an imperfect outline. Why? Because sometimes quality is the barrier. You're trying to perform and begin simultaneously. Separate them. The first stage is not make it good. The first stage is make it exist. You can improve something that exists. You cannot edit a blank page. This sounds simple, but psychologically it changes the contract. You're no longer asking yourself to prove your ability. You're asking yourself to produce raw material. And once raw material exists, the task becomes less abstract. There is something to react to, something to improve, something to continue. Another useful shift is to stop measuring success only by completion. If the project takes 3 months, completion cannot reward you today. So create a closer finish line. Did you work for 20 focused minutes? Success. Did you write 300 words? Success. Did you send the difficult email? Success. Did you study one section? Success. You are moving the reward closer to the behavior. This matters because your brain needs evidence that action leads somewhere. But there is an even more important skill: learning to notice the moment before avoidance. Imagine you sit down to work. You open the document. Then suddenly you feel an urge to check your phone. Usually, the story becomes, I got distracted. But slow the moment down. What happened immediately before you reached for the phone? Maybe you didn't know what to write. Maybe the task became confusing. Maybe you saw how much work remained. Maybe you imagined someone criticizing the result. Maybe boredom appeared. The phone wasn't random, it offered an exit. So instead of immediately obeying the urge, name what is happening. I'm confused. I'm afraid this won't be good. I'm bored. I don't know the next step. I feel overwhelmed. Naming the emotion creates distance from it. Now discomfort becomes information rather than a command. You can feel overwhelmed without leaving. You can feel uncertain without researching for another 3 hours. You can feel bored without opening another tab. You can feel afraid of failure and still write the next sentence. This is where self-trust begins. Not when you become perfectly disciplined, but when you repeatedly discover, I can feel discomfort without abandoning what matters to me. And when you do, procrastinate, because you will. Be careful what happens next. Many people lose 20 minutes to avoidance, then lose the rest of the day to shame. I already ruined the morning. I'll start properly tomorrow. This day is wasted. One mistake becomes permission for another. But you don't need a new day. You need a new decision. At 10:47 a.m., at 2:16 p.m., at 11:30 at night, you can return. The ability to return matters more than maintaining a perfect streak. Because consistency is not never drifting. Consistency is becoming better at coming back. And this changes how you should speak to yourself. Instead of, why am I so lazy? Try, what made this task difficult to approach? Instead of, why can't I just do it? Try, what is the smallest concrete action available? Instead of, I wasted the entire day. Try, what can I still do with the next 10 minutes? These questions reduce shame and increase information. And information helps you redesign the environment. If your phone repeatedly becomes the escape route, move it. If a vague task creates paralysis, define the next physical action before stopping work. If you procrastinate because projects feel endless, use short work periods with visible stopping points. If you avoid because you're exhausted, examine your sleep and workload instead of demanding unlimited discipline from a depleted brain. Good systems do not assume you will always feel motivated. They make action easier when you don't. But perhaps the biggest change is accepting that caring about something does not guarantee that doing it will feel good. Important work can feel boring. Meaningful work can feel frightening. Things you deeply want can create uncertainty. You can care about your health and still not want to exercise tonight. You can care about your career and still be afraid to send the application. You can care about your art and still hate the first draft. You can care about your future and still want immediate comfort. These are not contradictions. They are part of being human. The goal is not to reach a point where the important choice always feels easier. The goal is to stop requiring ease before you make it, because eventually the question changes. You stop asking, how do I make myself want to do this? And start asking, can I take the next step even though part of me doesn't want to? Sometimes that next step lasts 5 minutes. Sometimes it's one sentence, one phone call, one page, one application, one uncomfortable beginning. And that may not feel impressive, but your life is rarely changed by the things you intended to do. It changes through the moments when intention becomes behavior. So, if there is something you care about that you've been avoiding, you do not need to finish it today. You do not need perfect motivation. You do not need confidence. You do not need to know exactly how everything will turn out. You only need to stop asking the first step to guarantee the final result. Let it be small. Let it be imperfect. Let it feel uncomfortable. But let it exist. Because sometimes the opposite of procrastination isn't productivity. It's simply being willing to begin before you feel ready.